And here it is. Okay, so welcome, Hedy, one more time. This is an absolute honor to have you with us today. And as you may know, Hedy Habra is a poet, artist, and essayist. She has authored 4 poetry collections, most recently, the collection called Or Did You Ever See the Other Side by Press 53, published in 2023. She has also published The Taste of the Earth, also by Press 53 in 2019, and it was the winner of the Silver Nautilus Book Award, honorable mention for the Eric Hoffer Book Award, and finalist for the USA Best Book Award. Her collection, Tea in Heliopolis, won the USA Best Book Award, and Under Brushstrokes was finalist for the USA Best Book Award and the International Book Award. Her story collection, Flying Carpets, won the Arab American Book Award's honorable mention and was finalist for the Eric Hoffer Award. Her book of criticism, Mundos Alternos y Artísticos en Vargas Llosa, examines the visual aspects of the Peruvian Nobel Prize winner narrative. Habra holds a BS in pharmacy. She earned an MA and an MFA in English and an MA and PhD in Spanish literature, all from Western Michigan University, where she has taught Spanish. A 21-time nominee for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net, and recipient of the Nazim Hikmet Award, her multilingual work appears in numerous journals and anthologies. And Hedy, I'm pretty sure the list goes on and on. This is the very, very summarized glimpse at Hedy's numerous achievements and wonderful poems. Hedy, one more time, welcome aboard, and the floor is yours. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rula, for this amazing and humbling introduction. Thank you all for coming today. I see so many familiar faces. I cannot address everybody, but I see Bernard, Dolores, Cynthia, Martine, Ray, and Abbas, and many more. Jill, thank you so much for being here. So I had opened the chat and it was intrusive, and I'm trying to close it. So, okay, now I'm back. So I think I can start my presentation by screen sharing, Rula.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So what? If everything works, I should have the first page.
Perfect.
Okay. So I'll be presenting my second ekphrastic collection, Or Did You Ever See the Other Side? And here is the book cover. And I'd like to talk about my relationship with art. And I have painted the cover of this book. I have been taking Chinese art for more than 15 years. And I chose this painting with a woman seen from the back because we don't see her face, and neither can we see her expression. And it sort of fits a little bit the question in the title, Or Did You Ever See the Other Side? So I'm hoping that all the readers will engage into discovering those hidden meanings. And the book was like 8 years in the making. And all the poems title begin with or. I'd like to talk about the early influences, my mother's paintings as I grew up during my childhood till age 17. I was surrounded by all of her paintings. They were mostly copies of old masters. And I engaged in a dialogue. This is one of her paintings with all of those characters and the dialogues. And I triggered my imagination. I would imagine stories. And of course, these stories would change over the years. When I was 6 or 7, I would look at this painting and I was convinced it was her older brother telling her to cover herself or else she'd catch cold. And as I grew a little bit older, I thought, oh my, it might have something to do with morals or sins. Of course, I went I'm Catholic. I went to Catholic school, so that entered the picture. Then the story evolved, and I started thinking romantically. I imagine him as a prince. So my mother really is the one who encouraged me all my life to take art classes, and her passion for art has led me to really paint and spend a lot of time in museums. And now, over the past, I don't know, 30 years or 40 years, to write ekphrastic poetry. Because even in my other collection that are memoirs, I have ekphrastic poetry, and I keep on writing it. Not only in the collection that are mainly ekphrastic. Another very important influence has been Mario Vargas Llosa, the great Peruvian novelist who was the Nobel laureate in 2010. I spent more than a decade or 2 decades studying his work, and he's an art critic, an art lover, and he has several ekphrastic novels. So I have learned a lot from his different approaches to ekphrasis. So I'll start with a painting by Remedios Varo, Encounter. Remedios Varo is one of my favorite artists, and I have maybe almost 3 dozen poems inspired by her work in this collection. In this collection, I have mainly used as source of inspiration contemporary women artists of different ethnicities or nationalities, and a lot of surrealist artists. So the first poem I'll read is, or what if one could overhear words hovering over a pond? She loosely wraps a muslin around her slender body. Waves swirl in suspension from head to toes as she dresses and undresses in a rhythmic motion. You'd think she's getting ready for a performance, but mirrors are banned from her walls. Their shattered shards buried in small boxes stacked on shelves, their dark lids gathering dust like archived journals, each filled with forgotten objects, mute messages, layers shed from her past. Each time she tries to open a box, hesitant, she sees her fractured self staring, keeps the lid half open like a half-open notebook, lest she'd stumble on the tumult of empty words, ellipses, mostly silence. Each time she faces this startled look, she slowly lowers the lid, won't let the voice utter the same unsettling questions hovering over her dreams, over her dilated pupils, still like the satin surface of a pond, won't let her repeat what she already knows.
That was gorgeous, Hedy. I loved it.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if anyone has a comment or a question. Chloe, could you see anyone on your side? I don't see anything in the chat box. Any hands up?
Okay,
Okay,
so
well, yes, we have one here. What keeps you writing? From Ray Gallagher.
that's a very difficult question. I would say I don't know what keeps me writing. It's the desire to learn more about myself, to learn more about the world, and to create.
Wow, that's wonderful. And the thing is, what keeps us writing from your answer, Hedy, is what keeps us going. It's this interaction, this relationship with the world around us, with ourselves. So that's a very beautiful way of putting it. And also your answer that you don't know. That's very important because it also implies that it comes out naturally. And when you think about it, this is a natural part of you trying to figure out, discover, probe more deeply into the world, if I'm right. So that's what I sense from it.
Okay, so I'll move to the next.
Okay, thank you, Hedy. Let's go to the next one.
Yes, and another Remedios Varo painting. For those of you who don't know Remedios Varo, she's a Spanish-Mexican surrealist artist, and I really love the way she explores the psyche, and her paintings are filled with symbols, and they really inspire me to write. When I write ekphrastic poetry, I write persona poems, some of them in different forms, but from the point of view of either a character. Sometimes I address the artist, so there isn't any homogeneity. This specific painting, Woman Leaving the Psychoanalyst, inspired me to write, or could I finally be allowed to leave my analyst? I'm leaving his office with my hair standing on end. No iPhone at hand, or else that would have made a great selfie. I walk out with a steady stride, tired of these useless sessions. After all, am I not reconciled with my dark side? No more makeup to hide the once widening circles around my eyes. I'll let the gray show on my temples. Allow my electric hair to rise and curl at will, catching sunlight and moonbeams in its spires. I don't need him anymore, but he doesn't seem to know it. There's still work to be done, he says, wants me back over and over again. I have no more stories to tell. No more foggy areas to recover, forge, and weld. Has he become addicted to my voice? Or does he see his own shadow reflected in my dreams? See, this is the story of my life, analyzing instead of being analyzed, entertaining instead of being entertained.
Thank you, Hedy. Hedy, I was wondering, what made you see all those images? It's like adding a different layer, a new layer onto the poem. What caused that? And I feel, of course, as many of Vargas Llosa's paintings, there was an alchemical theme here.
Well, it's
Sorry, I mean, yeah.
definitely, the painting resonated with me. It showed a woman rebelling against, in some ways, patriarchy. But it also resonated with what I've heard from many of my friends, or what I've experienced with counseling. And so I sort of, it's a composite. It becomes like a composite reaction or a composite character that
Right.
is developed in this poem.
Yeah, and sorry, I meant Remedios Varo, not Vargas Llosa. So thank you, Hedy. I see Raymond's hand up. So would you want to take another question now, Hedy?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Hello, Hedy. I'm very curious about how you go about the writing from looking at the painting. Is it a process where there's some immediate reaction and you try to get that down? Or do you look at that painting like over a period of days? How does that work for you?
I think both approaches work for me. Like sometimes I will see a painting and automatically there is something that is triggered within me. Like when you see the photograph, Roland Barthes talked about the punctum and the studium. The studium is what you see. The punctum is an element that varies with different people, that is going to hit you and puncture your heart and puncture you like with a needle. And so there is something definitely when I go to a museum that makes me stay in front of the painting for a very long time. And the source of inspiration as I write sometimes stems from that feeling. It sometimes also resonates with some personal experiences. And so it becomes very intimate. and it stays on my mind for a while till I am able to write several drafts. Now, the other approach is that I know that some paintings are speaking to me, but there are too many voices speaking to me. I don't know which one to listen to. I don't know from which point of view to start the poem. And sometimes I will print that painting and put it in a visible place in my studio, my office, and I will look at it sometimes for a month, sometimes. And I mentally would always continue this kind of dialogue with these artworks. I have like several drafts that are on my desktop that's been reworked for the past sometimes months or years. And so it varies, but I think, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, yeah. And to follow up with that, do you feel, you said the painting speaks to me. Do you ever get the feeling that the artist is speaking to you through the painting?
Absolutely. That's why
Yeah.
I have several paintings, poems, especially in under brushstrokes, where I address the artist, where I make the artist speak, where I talk about the models who are modeling and his reaction watching the models as he is painting, and all of these different possibilities, these different scenarios. And it is very, it's, you enter a different world because painting and brushstrokes, colors and composition are different languages.
Yeah.
And so to try to elucidate these languages, you have to develop intimacy, keep on looking at the artwork, sculpture, whatever visual artwork that you have, you are responding to.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you.
Certainly is fascinating. Thank you, Hedy, for sharing such a beautiful process and poem. So you might want to move next now to the other one.
I thought Gottfried had a question.
Oh, sorry. Didn't see that.
I don't see everybody, but I saw his hand.
Thank you very much, Hedy. It's absolutely beautiful and wonderful to be with you. I was just wondering, it's only a very brief suggestion, if you could possibly leave the painting and to have the painting with your voice might be much more powerful than to have your voice and the text.
I can do that.
Just a request. I mean,
I don't know. What do you think?
wonderful either way.
We can alternate. We can do one like this and one the other way around.
Yeah, sure, yes.
What do you think?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So maybe we
Thank
can.
you, Gottfried.
But the problem is that the way I set up this presentation, it slides. So I have to look at it to read from it.
There's an easy solution here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb the your presentation. Sorry, Hedy. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I like that, but I'm not working with a Microsoft. I'm working with slides. And so if I'm projecting the painting, I can look at the poem, or I can read it from the book, but I would have to prepare ahead of time the pages. And I didn't plan it that way.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
A
no, I
simple
love
suggestion.
it. I love it. Thank you. I think we have Glenda with the question.
Yeah, I quite like seeing the poem and hearing it at the same time. A simple suggestion for Gottfried would be simply to close his eyes and listen, but not look at the screen. And those of us who like to look at the words can enjoy them.
Well, actually, I can go back and show you the slide after. Oh, well, I shouldn't play around because then I'm totally lost. I think I should continue with the same pattern I had prepared. I'm not.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what we can do is if someone does not want to, if they prefer not to see the text, maybe just the minimizing of the screen would do, and then you could re-show the image. So if you're more comfortable with the text, Hedy, And, some people might choose to read it as you read it, and others might, it's fine. We could just minimize the screen and then everything will be off, except your voice, of course.
Okay.
But thank you for the suggestion, Gottfried, and thank you, Glenda. And Hedy, I guess you would want to continue now.
Yes, so this is a painting by another artist I greatly admire. Her name is Juanita Guccione. And maybe I'll wait a little bit to let everybody enjoy the painting before I read the poem, so that you have the elements of the painting that might strike you. Or so this is Juanita Guccione. She's an American artist. She has painted in abstract styles, realistic, and a lot of surrealist paintings. So this painting is called She Had Many Faces, and it inspired me to write, or weren't we always told to remove our makeup at night? Or weren't we always told to remove our makeup at night? On certain evenings when the sun turns ebony, my heart becomes an obsidian pendant hanging between my breasts, conjuring old lovers' touch, my newborn's avid lips. I can freely perform, peeling off face after face the masks that haunted me all my life, each dangling from a strand of my graying hair, caught within a self-woven web of conflicting feelings brimming with sap and dew. I become a puppeteer, pulling threads of time, braiding throbbing heartbeats with the stillness of empty silences. That's when I realize how much care was taken in recreating myself as though with stage makeup. Or else, how could I have coped with the different roles allotted to me at every crossroad, each gilded with a false sense of free will?
Wonderful. I love the symbolism of removing makeup and the symbolism of night. So, but I see Bernard has a question.
We can't hear you.
Oh, Bernard, you're still muted.
Oh, there we are. Oh, Hedy, it's lovely to be here tonight. And I just wanted to say that this particular poem is a real favorite of mine. I love it because it encapsulated so much of what the other poetry is about in one poem, and I adore it. My question, though, is rather a boring one, really. It's about what I was struck when I read the poems was how the text was set out, and how did you decide on that? It seemed to me that, for instance, some of the text, the last one regarding the analyst, was set out a bit like a report. And I wonder whether you were aware when you were setting out the work that the poems were quite changing in text and in format a bit. Were you aware that that was happening, or did it just happen naturally?
No, when I organized my collection, I played around with the format.
Yeah.
So when it is a prose poem, I had the choice of leaving the long lines or making shorter lines. So it depended. Right. It depended because in the collection, the poems echo one another, and there is a kind when I arranged it in a certain way. So they had to fit when they had a neighbor that looked alike. So right. It is a matter of visualizing the formatting. If you would like, I can go back and show you the painting again for those of you who would prefer that, and probably those of you who prefer to keep the impression of the painting might not look at the text when I read it then.
The other thing that struck me was this is the most almost the most literal portrayal of the art of the poem, of the artwork as a poem, it just feels so connected with the picture in a wonderful way, and also in the medium that's used, in the colours that are used. You reflect that so well in the words that you use.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That makes me very happy. Actually, sometimes it is a kind of a painting with words. It is like all the masters, they learn by painting, copying other paintings, and then they develop their style. And here with words, when the poem is more descriptive, although not exactly reflecting the original, it's like repainting it, offering another verbal image representation. But sometimes when I write ekphrastic poetry, I try purposely not to describe the painting, but to create something entirely new that was a response to the feeling I had from the painting or one element in the painting.
That works just as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hedy. Chloe, are there any comments or questions in the chat box that you can see?
I was just looking at Lisa's remark, sort of saying, she's really intrigued by your creation process from the paintings. And it just seems to me that hums so nicely with what you've just spoken of about how the great masters copied before developing their style. I wonder if that's something that's present in your poetry and creation also.
I think it is probably, and not only for ekphrastic poetry, but we spend decades and decades reading other poets' work. We are influenced by styles. We do try to reproduce different forms and study from the masters and then the more modern poets who have developed this form. So it is an ongoing learning process.
Amazing.
Of creating, recreating, and developing one's own style.
Stunning. I think we also had Joan, who now has her hand up to ask a question, but perhaps I'll just read your comment first, which is saying how much she loved that last line of, removing the gilding of that false sense of free will. Maybe you'd like to ask your question now, Joan.
Yes, thank you. The idea, Hedy, which I really caught more this time with seeing the painting as well as reading the poem, is I didn't realize how imprisoned the characters seem to be in the painting. And here you have, your title takes us to the fact that we're kind of imprisoned by a rule, or weren't we always told to remove our makeup at night? And you go from that simple quote unquote rule to showing that we have decisions. Sometimes we feel like we're a puppeteer, but sometimes we are the puppet. How could you cope with the different roles allotted to you at every crossroad? And then each role is gilded with a false sense of free will. So we're making decisions, we're putting on masks, we're taking off makeup, we're doing these things without a real free will underneath. We're kind of caught in a sense of roles that we need to we think we need to be playing. And I just thought it was brilliant in the way that you expressed it here. So such a lot behind those little lines. I just thought this was an example of why I like your work so much, because you present such deep concepts, and even whether you're doing it ekphrastically or whether just in your personal ekphrastic response, and you sum it up at the end and you take us to thinking. you posed a question for us. Was there a way you could have done it differently? I mean, I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, Hedy, and I wondered if my love for that last line was intended by you, or if it was just part of the overall creative process in the poem.
Again, it's difficult. It's difficult to reply up to what extent are we conscious, but I think, yes, it was conscious because I revise a lot. So I revise a lot, and the poems I write usually are the response to a lot of existential questions, to a lot of inner, like meditations, introspection. And again, that's why I like the idea of the questions in the title of lots of poems and at the end, because I'm also trying to understand, and I'm engaging in a dialogue with the reader, with the potential reader, asking the reader to respond with his or her own perspective. Thank you very much, John. I love your analysis. It's wonderful.
Well, I love your poems, so.
Thank you. So,
Thank
shall
you
I?
so much. So yes, so let's move to the next poem.
Yeah, so the next poem is an installation, and it is a Japanese artist, contemporary, who does a great number of installations that are huge. She uses thousands and thousands of donated keys, and sometimes you have some boats, some racks, and some doors. I picked this poem as a source of inspiration, and the background is made with fibers, the color of passion, of blood, or whatever you would imagine. And the installation, her shows are called The Key in the Hand by Shiharu Shiota. And this particular artwork inspired me to write, or how do you keep track of all the keys you once owned? And I think in this instance, I'm sure Gottfried would like to look at the poem, because the poem has a particular, oops, what have I done? The poem has a special configuration. So the poem is, how do you keep track of all the keys you once owned? Keys to unlock one's buried memories. Keys to the family cottage you had to sell. Keys that once opened different sized locks. Keys that had to be changed after an infraction. Keys that yearn for the doors they used to open. Keys thrown into a deep well, still oozing blood. Keys to the palaces King Farouk owned in Egypt. Keys to learning how to deal with oneself and others. Keys to the meaning of feelings that you kept losing. Keys to the safes holding papers that ruled your lives. Keys kept in a jewelry box that must have mattered once. Keys lost, forgotten, or treasured as a possible comeback. Keys to the wrought iron patio gate half covered with jasmine. Keys that opened the car door that led you straight to the beach. Keys to dreams horned and ivory gates that keep getting mixed up. Keys meant to reach the heart of a man before he changed the locks. Keys you hold in your palm and run your fingers over and over again. Keys to an old friend's house who once relied upon you to water her plants. Keys passed on from generation to generation to reclaim the ancestral home. Keys that you had to return to the hotel where you wished you'd spend a lifetime. Keys to all the cars you've ever owned and led you through long forgotten crossroads. Keys to the office you left, carrying a cardboard filled with what seemed important. Keys to the wooden carved secretary your mother handed down to you that held no secret to her. Keys to the homes you kept leaving from country to country, from one neighborhood to the next.
Wow, Hedy, that is an incredible poem. It's actually one of my favorites in your new collection. So it's gorgeous, and it really has the key to so many things, to so many emotions, and to so many memories and images, and mainly the key to change and how, change in memory and how we deal with it and how we carry them on with us. All the memories as we change, as we move places. And wow, I mean, I loved it in the book, but hearing you read it is really something else. So thank you for that, Hedy.
Thank you so much.
I'm wondering if anyone has questions. Chloe, do you see anyone on your side? I don't see anyone
I would
yet.
like to leap in with a question of my own, if I may, which is I'm wondering about the resonance between each of the poems and the paintings you've chosen this evening. Because I get the sense they're each from different collections or different books. And yet in the first poem, we met someone whose messages were muted. They were not performing. We next met someone who was leaving their psychoanalyst, kind of, and then someone described as freely performing as they unpeeled their faces. And now we speak of keys unlocking things, or even some boxes we don't need anymore. Like there's an emergent theme of liberation. Like, did you have this sense of these poems prior to tonight?
When I put the this is a wonderful question, actually, and very insightful of you. These are recurring themes throughout the collection. And of course, as I wrote each individual poem, I was not aware of it. But when I put the collection together, as I said, it has 100 pages and 5 different sections, then it dawned on me. I would see, and that in some ways, some of these themes helped organize them. They're not organized in that sense. What I tried to do for the presentation, I didn't try to organize them as in a manuscript, but I wanted to give the audience an array, an idea of the different sources of inspiration. That was my goal. So I didn't pay attention to the fact that in the slide presentation, they would resonate, but they do in the collection throughout. And you perceived it right away after a few poems. Thank you.
I love the phrase you just used, the different sources of inspiration, because it almost paints to me a picture of you, the poet, or me, the percipient, as the thing which brings unity or connection within all of these different sources and diverse streams. Thank you so much for answering.
Thank you so much. I mean, many of you have made so many comments. One speaks of the ideal reader, but I see many ideal readers in that in that audience today. So thank you.
Thank you, Hedy, and thank you, Chloe, for the wonderful question as well. Do we have any more? Okay, yes, I see now a hand up. I see Ray.
Yes, it's interesting because my first question was going to be, have you ever published the text of the poem next to the painting that inspired it? But as I was experiencing this poem as you were reading it, it just filled me with such images of my own as a reader, which I'm sure is totally different for all of us. But it's like you've taken an image and then you've created words, and those words are, from the reader's perspective, now are translated back into the images that we're downloading into the poem as well. So it's like you're creating space for our imaginations to work. So I had a friend who wrote a series of poems on Hiroshige prints, and he couldn't get them published because you needed permission from the artists to publish their work, and it was just too tough. But finally, he got it published online. But what I experienced with this poem was, you know, a great richness that the words are creating incredible images in the reader.
Well, thank you so much for these comments, because I'll answer in two parts. The first part is, yes, I have been publishing a lot. Actually, all the poems in the collection were published prior to being organized. Some of them were published with the reference of the artwork, and some of them were published without referencing the artwork. So, because in the collection, I put an index of 3-4 pages at the end of the book listing all the artworks and the sources of inspiration. But what is mainly important to me is the poem, is the verbal image. And that's why I did not put the name of the artist or the titles throughout the collection. It's only at the end. So you can have a double experience. You can read the collection, and if you're interested, you can look up the index, look at the artwork, and reread it, having a totally different. The other thing I wanted to say is that there are many journals, such as the Ekphrastic Journal, McQueen, Quinterly, who welcome you to send Ekphrastic work with the link to the painting, and they will publish in their journals, they will publish the image alongside many. But many other journals will publish, let's say, this poem with an epigraph, a reference to the title, and Shihuro Shiota, the key in the hand. Others will accept it without even any referencing. So this is, there are many possibilities.
Yeah, it's great how you've done it, because you're giving the reader the chance to then go back and see where the inspiration came from, and that would be different than having that direct experience of reading the poem. That's great.
Thank you. I like what you said, Raymond, about each person reading this poem is going to go in different places in their own lives, and is going to trigger images from different stages of their lives based on each of these lines. And that's why the question, that kind of validates my decision to have the title as a question, or how do you keep track of all the keys you own? It's a kind of direct address to the reader, telling him to go to memory lane and revisit his or her life.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Hedy, I see Glenda's hand up. Do you have time for one more question before the next poem?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, a very quick question. I was wondering how you decided on the shape of the poem. The one which inspired you was full of like rectangular doors, but this is like sort of getting longer and longer the longer it goes, the longer lines as you go through the poem. And I was wondering how you arrived at that shape, basically.
That's a great question. See, when I write poetry, I write drafts, and these drafts are revised. That it can take months, or they're here and go back. And then at one point, I decide it's going to be a lineated poem or a prose poem, or sometimes I stumble and I make it into a pantoum, because with a pantoum I can have some disconnected or another form. Now, in this case, I had so many thoughts and meditations about keys that I didn't know how to come about and how to organize it in a poem. And automatically, I thought about anaphoric repetition of keys. And as I was organizing my ideas and my lines, I started with the shorter ones. And it just happened, then I started purposely shaping it this way, because in the back of my mind, I can imagine the triangular shape as very similar to some parts of some keys.
Hmm.
And so that was my creative process, but whoever reads and sees the poem can have their own interpretation.
Hmm.
Wow, I love how you brought in the triangular shape. It's like thinking in shapes, thinking in corners, thinking in numbers, visually. All those wonderful connections that you bring and you reflect in your poetry, Hedy. Wow, I mean, we could go on and on about this poem. It's just gorgeous.
Thank you so
But
much.
yes,
Oh,
next.
it moved by its own. I barely touched the mouse. So in another Remedios Varo, one of my favorite paintings by her, it's called Vagabond. And I'll give you some time to look at it. It inspired a pantoum titled, Or How Can We, no, this one is, sorry, a prose poem. Or how can we ever cut down to the bare essentials? And again, it's a persona poem. So I think you had time to analyze the painting and absorb a little bit the feeling. I'll move to the poem. Or how can we ever cut down to the bare essentials? He kept retreating from room to room, feeling the weight of all the furniture and mementos staring at him like deceased relatives. It was as though the house wrapped layers of time around him, confining him inside a pod about to burst open. For a while, he'd only use his bedroom and the kitchen. He eventually retreated to the sunroom. Its walls, lined with bookshelves, comforted him as he lay on the wicker couch opposite the bay window. He soon realized he needed fewer meals and only one change of clothes. Feathers seemed to grow out of his bones, filling him with a desire to embrace the movements of the wind. He tried to get rid of plants, of his archived papers, of the photos that couldn't find their place in the abandoned albums. He sorted out the books he knew he'd never read or reread. Finally, the day came when, unable to break all ties, he clung to his tabby, the photo of a woman, a purple-lipped Cattleya, a few books, anything he could hide under his strong wings, slammed the door and left.
Wow. Thank you, Hedy. I can't see any questions from here. Chloe, can you? I'm trying to scroll through the names.
No questions here yet. I'd just like to say, I love this line in the second stanza, filling him with a desire to embrace the movements of the wind, full stop. Like the punctuation of the line acting as that obstacle to desire, that obstacle to movement. I wonder if there's anything you'd like to say about kind of the way you're punctuating this poem to represent movement.
Well, sometimes the longer line, the long run-on sentences, as you express the passage of time, a quick introspection, and the period, as you well noticed, acts like a stop sign and a barrier. And so that's the only plays, different usage of either short sentences versus the longer ones. The longer ones would express a sense of time passing very quickly.
I also love the ending, and when you say slammed the door and left, and it's like the ending of the poem and the perfect scene to end it. And it's just very ending in the image itself. So was that also done intentionally?
Well, again, if I may, Chloe, you were talking about liberation. Here's another poem about liberation. And Joan was talking about the different roles we have to play in society, like you can be a wife, a mother, a teacher, a professor, a scholar, a cook, a house cleaner, a gardener, and a daughter or a son. So all the impositions, self-imposed impositions set by society are there in all the poems, with a sense every time of a freedom, a desired freedom, different kinds of freedoms.
Yeah, I felt the line you give us here, finally, the day came when unable to break all ties. We're actually breaking right there. We're breaking over the line ending. So to me, that did feel like a gesture to the possibility of freedom, of breaking through those impositions of which you've just spoken.
But he doesn't break completely. There are still things that are extreme. He can't do it. He can't live without.
I guess I'm an optimist about absolute freedom. Glenda's put a lovely comment in the chat, actually. An astonishing poem. Sounds like my life. I think this is really resonating with us here in the room.
Thank you, Glenda. Yeah, I also feel that there are lots of connections with this poem with the pandemic. Because during the pandemic, I started feeling that I needed less and less and less of what I, thought was indispensable before the pandemic. And so in some ways, there are certain similarities. Okay, so maybe I'll move to the next one. And you can always ask question about, I saw there was a question, a hand raised, but we can go back to that question if you wish. I can go back. Rula, are we continuing?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So if you want to go back to it now, or do you mean you want to go back to it later?
I think Raymond had a question, so.
Okay,
you
yeah,
had a
that's
question
fine.
about
Absolutely.
the poem or the painting?
Yeah, it's the how much weight one word carries is really interesting. And in this poem, for me, feathers, the feathers, and immediately think of a bird which needs absolutely nothing. It just wants to fly. It just wants to go. It has no possessions, nothing. And I just felt a great. I could maybe some at my age, at the end of my life, I've got all this stuff. What am I going to do with it? I want to get rid of it. I want to be more free. And there's those two impulses. You want to be secure, and I have too many books, and I can't give up any of them. And yet, I just thought it was a great tension in there. And when the feathers come in, that's a great line.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, the poem stops there, but we don't know if the total freedom of this character is not going to be realized, become reality. So that's why all we do is a poem. A poem doesn't have the last word. A poem also can evolve. This is, again, Remedios Varo. And I think it's a fascinating painting, because you could probably be able to write 4 or 5 poems inspired by this painting. And it's called Harmony. And it inspired me to write a poem titled, "Or call me a hoarder if you will, but try to understand." And it is a pantoum. So we'll move to, "Or call me a hoarder if you will, but try to understand. Each and every object in my drawers has a story of its own. When I revisit the selves I once was, minute black silhouettes align themselves over the power lines of my mind as on a score, until the outline of an alter ego erupts, adding a silent note. When I revisit the selves I once was, minute black silhouettes rub over every object's skin, absorbing smells and vibrations, until the outline of an alter ego erupts, adding a silent note. And would they engage in a dialogue in the utmost darkness? Rub over every object's skin, absorbing smells and vibrations, like the rosary stringed with pearls my mom loved so much. And would they engage in a dialogue in the utmost dark? Sorry, what's happened? I was trying to remove. So I was at the second. Would they engage in a dialogue in the utmost darkness? Rub over every object's skin, absorbing smells and variations, like the rosary stringed with pearls my mom loved so much. And would they engage in a dialogue in the utmost darkness, map the vestibules of memory, run fingers over shining veins, like the rosary stringed with pearls my mom loved so much? Boxes of leftover yarn, her crocheted creations, tucked in drawers, map the vestibules of memory, run fingers over shining veins. Call it a bric-a-brac for those of us prone to engage in bricolage. Boxes of leftover yarn, her crocheted creations tucked into drawers, a bleached sand dollar that might become your grandson's treasure. Call it a bric-a-brac for those of us prone to engage in bricolage. Nothing is what it seems, only the meaning invested in its arcane language. A bleached sand dollar that might become your grandson's treasure. And just the sight of a handwriting triggers the deepest emotions. Nothing is what it seems, only the meaning invested in its arcane language. I keep digging as I become the archaeologist of my own experience.
Wow.
So, should I probably leave the painting while you have comments or
Sure,
questions?
yeah, we can have that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Great. And it's a beautiful painting with a beautiful poem. And I love how you said, Hedy, even the sight of a handwriting can trigger the deepest emotions. Is it something you've experienced, or is it something
Absolutely.
that came up for the poem? Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's wonderful because it also takes the visual aspect of words. So it isn't just about the words, the meanings, and the symbols, but also the handwriting is actually referring to how it looks visually.
I kept
And
my mother's letters. There were times where we were separated for a long time. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have, weren't online. When I left Egypt and lived in Lebanon, it was the Nasser period. We couldn't call, we couldn't communicate. She kept on writing. And I kept her handwriting, handwritten letters, her signature, her name, and then also friends. I kept at least one or two from every friend. And not long ago, I started rereading them, and unfortunately, about 15 of them have died, and some much younger than me. I mean, some died at 40, at 50, and anyway. So also the handwriting I have kept. I am a hoarder. I have kept all the essays with the corrections of my teachers and always loved when they complimented me. And I look back and I see their handwriting. I recognize their handwriting because I've had these professors for years. And so, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. So that's where the hoarding factor came from.
In part, yeah. I
Yeah.
really believe that things, objects have an aura. They
Right.
when some friends have given me little gifts below, and I know one of them is here in the audience, Cynthia. She gave me a beautiful Japanese style little blue enameled leaf. It's in my living room. Many of my friends have given you things like this. I see these friends and talk to them every minute I pass by, and I see these things. For me, that's how I am.
Wow, I'm so happy to hear that because it makes me feel so much better about all the hoarding that I do. I'm known to be someone who doesn't throw anything. And the hardest part of moving continents was actually that. And so many of my poet friends would joke and say, you know what, there's a lot of poetry that's going to come out of the hoarding. And well, now I see that you've done it, and that's very inspiring. It's really beautiful. So thank you, Hedy. And I see two hands up. I see Bernard and Gottfried. So Bernard? Oh, you're muted, Bernard.
Again, this is another favorite of mine. I am equally bad at hoarding. I've moved around a great deal. Just looking at the painting, it almost has a religious flavor to it. And when I first, what I was trying to do is relate the formal layout of the poem with the idea of hoarding. But then I looked at the picture, and actually it works brilliantly because you've got a mouth almost at an altar, reciting what's going on in the picture, both in the picture and the poem. And for me, that it works so brilliantly well, you know, in on so many levels. I love it. I think it's a great poem.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And Gottfried.
Just Hedy, thank you so very much. It feels as if you have written a poem about me. Absolutely beautiful and deeply moving. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That makes me so happy. You know, I just read a quote and I put it on my Facebook page. It is a conversation someone had with Borges, Jorge Luis Borges, one of my favorite writers, poets, and essayists. And they asked him, what's the use of poetry? What does, you know, and then he answered a very long reply, which I cannot paraphrase, but he said, what does the universe, what's the universe for? What is my life for? He said, and then at the end, he came down to a sentence that touched me. He said, if you read a poem and you are moved by it, then it has served its purpose. So when I hear you and Bernard, I feel extremely happy.
It has moved me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Chloe, anything in the chat box?
We have a lot of love and gratitude in the chat box. Martine saying a real tour de force. Ariane speaking of your poems as a treasure and thanking you for sharing this with us. And Glenda has brought up this image of the archaeologist of life and describes herself as an archivist. It's, yeah. I wondered actually if the archaeologist excavating his own experience has anything in common with the woman we met in one of your earlier poems, who was unpeeling her face and removing her makeup. These actions of excavating self through poetry.
Absolutely, I agree, because these are all layers and layers, like an onion. You know, I had a poem a long time ago that I'd written in French that never got published. I never did anything with it, but I think I used it somewhere else and later on. But it was something about my heart being peeled like a lemon, like an onion, and like removing layer by layer till all you have is the tender bud, a tender part. So that's what we all do as writers. We peel leaf, you know, after leaf, layer after layer. We try to understand ourselves. We try to understand the world. And
Thank you so
sometimes,
much, Hedy.
yeah.
So yeah, so I guess you could move on now. Don't see any more hands up.
Okay, this is a poem inspired by the painting by a Tunisian contemporary artist called Safia Farhat. And the painting struck me because of the beauty of the garment, which I'm sure is all hand woven and embroidered, and the youth of that character. Because in many, many countries, especially in certain Middle Eastern countries, women are married very, very young. So in response to that painting, The Bride, I wrote a poem from her point of view, which is titled, Or Would It Have Made a Difference Had I Known? And this is a pantoum. So I'll move to the poem. Or would it have made a difference had I known? Little did I know that when I'd wear my wedding gown, I'd be crossing a revolving door to a path of no return. At 6, I pricked my fingers with my needlepoint, learning to be the best bride a man could wish for. I'd be crossing a revolving door to a path of no return, away from clearings where I dip my feet into the stream. Learning to be the best bride a man could wish for, as I try not to burn myself with pots and pans. Away from clearings where I dip my feet into the stream, I bit my tongue to learn my mother-in-law's recipes, as I try not to burn myself with pots and pans. Little did I know how heavy unwanted weights could be. I bit my tongue to learn my mother-in-law's recipes, felt my heart shrink year after year till it lost its beat. Little did I know how heavy unwanted weights could be. With graying hair, I still feel the need for a warm touch. Felt my heart shrink year after year till it lost its beat. Night after night, I slip silently between the sheets. With graying hair, I still feel the need for a warm touch. Recapture an elusive smile in a face with receding features.
Gorgeous. And it's the first time I see this painting. It's very beautiful, and the poem is such a great accompaniment to it. So wondering if anyone has something to say or ask. I don't see anyone on my screen. Chloe, do you see anyone in the chat?
Martina's saying it's a really great and moving poem, but no questions yet. I think
Thanks,
it's one of the
Martina.
finest pantoums I've ever seen. The use of repetition when talking about a revolving door to a path of no return, but then that phrase itself returns. I mean, how deliciously wry and clever.
It's beautiful. And that's the thing about, I mean, Hedy's poetry is actually a performance. So the structure itself performs the words, performs the meaning behind the poem. So as you just said, Chloe, so yeah, there's a turning, and then there's the image of turning, and then the words that convey all that. So it's yeah, it's marvelous. Totally agree.
Thank you.
I think
And
Glenda
oh, now I
has a
see a
question.
hand. Two, actually. I see Glenda and Bernard. So Glenda, do you like to go first?
Just I didn't catch the painting and the name of the artist for this. Was that
Okay.
previous screen? Could I have a look again, Gwen?
Yes, I'm clicking, but it's not going back. I don't know why
Oh,
Ooh.
it's happening.
well, you went through a revolving door and you can't return.
Exactly.
Another performance. Oh, Chloe, thank you. Yeah, Chloe just wrote the name of the
I hope it's not gonna be
artist.
Oh, great.
frozen.
Thank you.
Thank you
I'll
so
try.
much. Okay, so right, let's see.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe.
I know what it is. In my
it is.
Chinese class yesterday, we were supposed to use a tool to mark down a few things, and all of a sudden that ruler, like a dock, appeared and froze the slide. So I was able to close it. I mean, you know, technology. This is. It was interfering. Sorry, here is the painting. It's the Bride by Safia Farhat.
I see it on the screen now. Yeah. It's there. It's lovely.
I think Bernard had a question.
Again, Hedy, I absolutely love this poem. It kind of, I think what is so clever about the way you write is it is a universal. I mean, the things that are running through my head are Alice in Wonderland, playing cards, but also Angela Carter's short stories. But I think you tap into so many cultures and so many things, and you bring them together in that magical way that inspires our imagination. And I suppose my question is, you said you were a great reader. Were you steeped well, did your mum read folk stories and fairy stories to you? Because where did this osmosis take place for you?
My mother was a great reader and she was an artist, and she read a little bit of everything. I had an older sister and older brother. They're here listening to us today. They're 5 and 7 years older. So I had his library and my older sister's library. We were schooled in French mostly. So we read mostly French literature, but we also read Mark Twain in translation. And so I read mostly in French. Of course, we studied English and Arabic, but most of it was in French. And then after that, then I spent a lot of time at the university reading a lot of literature in English, and mostly also Spanish and Latin American. And the fairy tales, I have all kind of collections of fairy tales that I keep rereading till now. I'm fascinated by Perrault, by the Hans Christian Andersen, by the two brothers Grimm. I am fascinated by the psychology behind, and read Bruno, what's his name? Bruno Bettelheim's book about fairy tales. I mean, this is part of my life. I like folk tales. I've read The 1001 Nights also, and I'm omnivorous. I'm an omnivorous reader.
Yeah. And that shows in your work, you know, absolutely.
Plus, there's a Jungian in you, Hedy.
That's why I was very fortunate to meet all of your Jungian friends and academics, and to be part of the Creative group, which I try not to miss every month. I have learned and grown. I've grown a lot from all these wonderful speakers and the conversations that follow. And I thank you very much for continuing this through the London Arts Research Center. It's amazing what you do. I mean, it's like bringing all these international minds to my home. And again, in admiration of everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Hedy. This is so kind of you. And you know how much of a huge honor it is to have you with us on board every Creative session. And you enlighten us so much. You teach us so much through your art, through your intellect, and through everything that you do. So very grateful for having you on board. And the huge honor is ours. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to check if anyone else has a question. I see Bernard's hand still up. Bernard, do you have another question? No. Okay. So Hedy, would you want to move on to the next
Yeah.
poem?
Let's see
Okay,
what the
perfect.
next slide is offering us. So this is Liz Collins. She's an American artist, and she does a lot of different media, multimedia. And this one is titled Beyond Words by Liz Collins. And I really liked the idea of these doves made out of printed paper and the cage that I assume they have escaped from or might escape from. And the cage is still filled with paper with headlines like torn newspapers. So this painting inspired me. It talked to me and it brought some personal memories throughout. So I wove the persona with my personal memories. And my question for that poem is, or aren't words worthless, oftentimes said and forgotten, written and erased? And here is the poem. Or aren't words worthless, oftentimes said and forgotten, written and erased? We used newspapers to clean window panes when I was growing up, with sheets crumpled up in balls, moistened with vinegar, with rub in circles, till words lost their lives, broken down into letters, ink fading into erasures, signs reforming anew. And what of the ritual cleaning and storing Persian carpets for the long summers? The last step involved lining them with newspapers soaked in turpentine. We would kneel, 2 or 3 of us, depending upon the size of the rug, and start rolling tightly in the shape of a log, like a bras de Venus cake, rolling inch by inch to avoid any trace of air inviting moths to invade spaces, bite their way into the hand-woven wool. And did we ever glance at any buried headlines or worry about words dissolving that die, drowning within the meaning once conveyed? And what of the fate of pages torn out of books, never opened, or abandoned volumes, forbidden novels, put on the index, or fallen into oblivion? At school, the nuns would only lend us books bearing an imprimatur seal or a nihil obstat. The day my dad died, they took me to my cousin's house. I saw a book cover, a hairy-chested man in a blue striped pajama bottom holding a red-haired woman in a matching top. That hardcover stained my mind with a taste of sin. We never knew we were growing up in a cage until words themselves rebelled, burst out of rolled rugs, discarded paper balls, recycling bins, became flying doves, unlocking doors. Follow their flight through crystal clear windows, so clean they'd vanish into air. See them rest over flying carpets, refusing to fade or be forgotten. Stronger wings morphing into fins, reaching out with their music to heights, valleys, and rivers where people thirst for the sound of letters.
Wow, what a beautiful weaving of images and meditations. It's wonderful. Wondering if anyone wants to say something. No hands up. So I wanted to ask you, Hedy, was it the painting that prompted the poem, or were those images and thoughts and ideas kind of cooking somewhere in utero, and then they kind of came along, they manifested, they came into, the poetry dimension with the image?
I think it's the painting. The painting with the headlines, the paper, the doves flying, the association of the doves with freedom and liberation. And then as I started writing, I remember newspapers. I do no longer use newspapers, but when we were kids, the newspapers were put to use. They were put to use for the carpets. They were put to use for cleaning windows. And, this association of ideas as I started writing brought back more memories and more reflections, and went on to all the words we could not read when we were at school. The nuns would only lend us to take home certain books. And then gradually we were able to read what we wanted. And so it was a kind of a meditation on the printed word. And how also some countries, as I was writing, I thought some countries will die to have some newspapers and some books, and they don't have them. And then I thought about when I mentioned the nuns, it was the Pope who put the nihil obstat and matter, but in the world, many people are subjected to censorship. So I was thinking about all of these ideas when I saw the cage and then the flight of the dove.
I love that. So it was actually the materiality of the written word that you associated with images of liberation, by some association. That's wonderful. And it's amazing how, again, this thought process of association is poetry on its own, because it's, this is what poetry is about. This is what all creativity is. It's putting unlike things together and then making something out of it. And I love how you reflect this in your writing. Thank you, Hedy. I don't see hands up, but I just saw something pop by Bernard. Wonderful. Your words have unlocked us all tonight. Oh, I'm sorry, Bernard needs to leave. So, Bernard, it was lovely having you with us today. I'm wondering if there's anything from before, Chloe. Do you see anything there?
No
Or would
question.
anyone want to ask?
But a few remarks, like Elena was saying, this really resonated with her childhood memories, and it's become quite an emotional experience.
Thank you.
Wow, I mean, everything is resonating with everybody. So you've touched on so many memories and so many soft points in our lives today, Hedy. Thank you so much for that. And I was wondering, you still have some more poems, right?
Yes, I have maybe 2 or 3.
Okay.
And
All
one
right, perfect.
recent one, yeah. Yes, we're reaching the end. This is a sculpture. I wanted to give an array, as I said, a diversity of my sources of inspiration, because I have poems inspired by movies. And so this is a sculpture by Liz Collins, and it's really fascinating. There is a story behind it. After she had finished, she's an American. I'm sorry, I said Liz Collins. I was thinking of the last slide. This sculptor is fascinating. You should explore her work if you haven't. Her name is Paige Bradley. And after she had finished this sculpture, it fell, it broke. When she put it together, she had the idea of putting light underneath, inside. So I'll move to the poem. So it is, or what if scars would suddenly become translucent? And the epigraph by Hafiz is, I wish that I could show you when you're lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. Did the Persian poet mean that it would take a special viewer to perceive the truth within? We were taught to hide our sorrow, forget and store grief in drawers. We learned to cover our imperfections with makeup and disappointments under a smile. We showcased our very best with trompe-l'oeil pleated skirt. Wouldn't the art of concealing allow pain to grow insidiously, preventing the mind from exploring one's rocky shores and inner landscapes? Paige Bradley remembered the broken shards of a nude woman's sculpture seated in a lotus position. At night, a light radiates from its core through seam lines. Each crack a lightning, a victory, the way Japanese kintsukuroi mends fragments of a broken vessel with gold, the repairing of shattered tassels, expressing hurt as renewal. And what if invisible scars reclaimed their corporeality by being tattooed all over the body or materialized through translucent interstices, letting light out, revealing the archaeology of pain?
Mm.
Beautiful. And I just love this sculpture.
Mm.
It's gorgeous. So there were a few comments. Wondering if there are any questions first.
I was going to jump in. I love this image of the mind as being that which explores our rocky shores and inner landscape. This image of the mind as the explorer of inner landscape rather than itself being our interior world. I just love this distinction. And I kind of wonder about your sense of whether the mind is the best explorer of our inner landscapes, or if there are better things one can do as an artist or a poet to really, really get into the inner landscape.
I'm sorry, I missed the second part because there were some sound interference.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second part of your question about
Someone needs to mute.
I suppose I'm curious about what your sense of the mind is as an explorer of inner landscape. Is kind of through the mind the best way to get into that landscape, or are there other techniques and modes of exploration that you as a poet have access to?
I personally don't think the mind is the major factor. I think it's the emotions, and it is I'm a very visual person and a very emotional person too. And so I think we understand a lot by insights because it depends what is the mind, because the mind is everything that is that enables us to think, but there is a rational mind and that puts order and organizes and explores, but there is also the affect, when we react to people or to situations or to visuals, there are some understandings that take place. We put together things in our mind sometimes without the rational mind helping us. But what I meant here is when we keep everything locked in, we don't allow the mind to reflect upon certain things, because we are told to store things in drawers and not to dwell on the past and not to dwell on the negativity. And sometimes what happens is that if things are not being opened up and explored, then I think it becomes more difficult for the mind to understand the mind's own landscape, because we have repressed so much. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm it's one of those emerging leitmotifs of your poems this evening, thinking back to one of the earlier characters whose messages were muted and stored in fragments in boxes she sort of wouldn't look at, or could only see herself in fragments of the mirror, but not the whole thing. Maybe that is another picture of the mind as you've just described, unable to see its own inner landscape because of repression and so forth. I mean, wow.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chloe, for the question and comment. I mean, that was great.
I love the way you bring together different poems.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
Okay,
and I mean, Hedy, it's just
did you
the,
have
you know, you're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to move to the next slide unless you have a comment.
Yes, okay.
This poem is by Remedios Varo, and the poem, the painting is titled The Farewell. And the question is, or did you really think it was the path of no return? And again, it is a persona poem from the point of view of one of these two characters. Or did you really think it was the path of no return? When we started walking along the winding road of separation, did you ever wonder if our shadows weren't reluctant to follow? What if they reclaim a life of their own, decide to concoct a different ending to your story, loosen their chains one by one? What if they might have stretched and stretched, retracing our footsteps towards the place where words were last spoken or omitted? And what if then, without restraint, without shame, pride aside, they would have wrapped themselves around each other in swirls tighter than the twists of rope, become braided wicks awaiting to be lit, linger back there with no witness, save perhaps an alley cat, a stray dog, or a lost sparrow?
Beautiful. Thank you, Hedy. And, you know, I was wondering if you'd like to give us the persona connection here. Like, what is it in the persona that you are trying to delve into here? So I see, for example, I see direction, the direction of the persona. I see the exploration of it.
Well, I see
Yes.
painting. Obviously, it's a man and a woman going in different ways in a maze, a red maze.
Mhm.
But their shadows are coming back. Apparently, there is a kind of duality there. And the shadows, if you look at the bottom of the painting, the two heads are facing one another in a very tender way.
Yeah.
They're maybe
Mm.
not embracing. And then there is this little cat
Mm.
also is very, very important to me because I love cats. So I think that cats, for example, I've had two cats, they each lived 17 years. I think they have witnessed everything that happened in my life, everything that I've told the cat or told myself, or everything they have witnessed. So this is the witness. I like the idea of the witness. And the persona, I don't know if it's the woman or the man who is looking back at the last dialogue and kind of, I have experienced a lot in my life, last encounters, last dialogues with friends or uh, more of a lovers, for example, where you end up never knowing if the last word was said, if the words were, so there were words that were omitted, but also words that were said without being felt. So all of these questions came to me in, I put it in the mouth of one of these characters.
Hmm. That is so beautiful.
But
And
again, it's
also the like the animus aspect as well.
that's great. I hadn't thought about that. I was waiting for you, the reader, for that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful. You always give us so much. There's just so much to mine in every one of your poems. And I'm wondering if anyone else would like to add something.
I'll
No
move then
hands
to
here.
the next one. I
Yeah,
think
okay. Yes.
Shall I move forward? Or there's a question by
Uh-huh. Oh, Glenda, yes, I see a question.
It's just really a comment on the painting, and it's very, very appropriate to the poem. But it seems to me the little cat is the witness. The cat has additional senses that the humans don't have, and it sees what they don't see, that they're probably entwined forever spiritually. They're not actually ever going to separate at some level in their being. Their shadow sides, as you say in Jungian psychology, the shadow sides are still together. And the shadow isn't always, sometimes the richest stuff is left in the shadow, the richest things to explore. And they've gone off, but they've left an important part of themselves behind, or they think they've left it behind, but probably it's not possible to leave it behind.
I love the way you phrase it. It's amazing. And the cat is aware, and the cat sees what we don't see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray also.
Yeah, it's also a comment on the painting, the overwhelming color red. I feel like I'm almost in the chambers of the heart somehow. And
Oh,
and they're emotionally, they want to be together, that tender look that you talked about, but their paths, they're moving in different directions or whatever, but that's not what neither of their hearts want to do. Yeah, so it's very interesting painting and poem.
thank you, thank you. I'll move so that we don't keep you guys. This is going to be a very, very short poem. And it's inspired by Red Balance visual score by Wadada Leo Smith. He is a jazz musician and a visual artist from Chicago. And he came to Kalamazoo, he had a show, and he painted his scores. And I wrote a few poems on some of it. So this one is called Red Balance, and the poem is why would anyone want to draw a keyhole? Or why would anyone want to draw a keyhole? This is not the outline of a silhouette. I am drawing a keyhole to find my way out of my own self. This is the black silk thread spun by the ink brush rising out of sweat and blood.
So wonderful. I also love the way it looks. So would anyone want to ask or say something here? Nothing on the screen. Anything in the chat box, Chloe?
Elena's saying this is a real treat for our eyes and ears, and just thank you for this delightful experience. And Joan's chiming in with this celebratory mood. She's loving the thread of the ink, spinning the words of the poem.
Thank you so much. We're getting to the final poem. I was asking Rula if after the final poem, I could read a poem that I've written a few weeks ago. And she said, we'll ask the audience. So now I'm getting to the end of the slide show. And this is a painting by Dorothea Tanning, American, also surrealist. And the painting is titled Birthday. And this poem I'm going to read is the last one in the collection. I'm sure Chloe is going to have to comment upon this one. So the poem is titled, Or Did You Think I'd Never Find the Way Out? Or did you think I'd never find the way out? It took me a while to wake up from a life not lived. I'd lost count of hours lying on a bed of algae. Not an Ophelia by vocation, I tear open my silk shirt, free my mind from layers of false pretense. The sound of a voice startles me with words, strange as a shooting star landing on my lap. Walking through endless corridors, I open door after door, find myself squeezed within each paneling, as though framed within my past in a surplus. Paso doble solo, one step forward, another backwards. I move in the dense air as in a dry aquarium. The last door faces a mirror, outlining a woman I never knew.
That is gorgeous, very surreal. No questions, it seems, Hedy.
I was thinking Chloe would be pleased to see
Yes, Chloe.
of liberation as the last poem.
I mean, what a joy to be invited to speak freely about liberation. I can think of no finer moment. But actually, just looking at the painting now to see sort of the softness and the vulnerability of the woman's chest as she's surrounded by all this fabric, I feel I want that to do as she did, to get away from the false pretense, as the woman who is removing her makeup sort of gets rid of the gilding of the false senses of free will. Or here she's leaving behind dense air, like the woman leaving her psychoanalyst was leaving foggy areas. I'm just getting the most beautiful vision of sort of women or humans walking beyond the storms of the world or the storms of experience. And again, we've got a cat here, winged and free, maybe integrating our animus as we walk into freedom.
Yes, so we're gonna really end on a note of freedom, and that ends the slideshow. But if you'd like, I wanted to share a recent poem that I've written, as I said, recently in a form that I had never tried before. It's ghazal. So if we still can ask for a few minutes of your patience, I will move to the poem. Again, it's unusual because it's an ekphrastic ghazal. Again, I am an artist and I love painting, so I can't escape it. So I've tried to write about this painting for 2 years, and I have the drafts, and then I was asked to collaborate in an anthology about ghazals, and I had never written a ghazal. So I tried myself at writing ghazals for a couple of months, and finally I wrote this one. And the title of this painting by Remedios Varo is Mimetismo, Mimesis or Mimesis. And the title is Mom's Later Visits When Her Eyesight Was Failing. And again, you can see the cat in the painting. So this is the ghazal. Mom's later visits after her eyesight was failing. When Mom would visit us, she'd sit in silence for hours, drowned in her inner world, while looking out the window, seemingly lost in thought, plunged into her inner world. With my Siamese cat, Binu, nested on her lap, she'd smile unperturbed in a sacred space, still reminding me of my tasks, never losing track of duties, all recorded in her inner world. I'd fear at times she'd be part of the upholster's chair, everything around her about to levitate, while behind her fixed gaze hid a riddle as she recited prayers only heard in her inner world. We talked about Dante's account of Paolo and Francesca's reading about Lancelot and Guinevere, how a warmth invaded them, gluing them to their seat, immersed in their inner world. A feeling she'd forgotten when veins and layers of skin cells shiver and blood flows. So we both tried to imagine Francesca motionless as lovers kissed and trembled in their inner world. Mom then mentioned her lost love, the one who never married for years, until she finally did. I saw her face light up and her absent look awaken as she reminisced in her inner room.
And what a fine ghazal this was.
Thank you.
What a wonderful session. An amazing, incredible collection. And as T.S. Eliot said, books, cats, life is good. So we had an amazing book. You shared amazing paintings with cats. And yes, life indeed is good with poetry like yours, Hedy. Thank you so much for being with us, all of you. And Hedy, such a great honor. And we are greatly looking forward to seeing you again. Hedy's poems are also on Indelible, our literary journal. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, it is www.indeliblelit.com. And you can find many of Hedy's gorgeous poems there. We also, when we teach the Poetic Inquiry course, I always like to give Hedy's ekphrastic poems as examples, and we always love working on them. So it is a great treat. It is a great treasure, and we are greatly honored to have you today, Hedy, today and every day.
Thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you so much, and here's a big clap for you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the comments. And I'll be reading the chat. So I will be spending more time with each of you after the session. Thank you so much, Rula. Thank you, Chloe. And I really appreciated every single comment because it made me understand my work so much better and see it under a totally different light. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I mean, all your comments, and Chloe especially, I mean, they have all added layers of beauty to Hedy's poems. Thank you so much. So Hedy, you said you wanted to, should I keep it on continuous chat, or you mean you wanted to be in touch with everyone after the session? Like
it's up to you, Rula. You're the boss.
Oh, I mean, it's up to you. Absolutely up to you. What we can do is if we close the session and we enable continuous chat, then I think you would always be able to see the messages. And of course, feel free to contact Hedy. Hedy is on Facebook. She's on Instagram. And feel free to comment, to ask questions. So she's always there. She's a wonderful social media figure as well.
I forgot how to save the chat.
Oh, I already did that, so I can send it over to you. Yeah, don't worry about it. So
Thank you. I'm
it's
sorry, I
already
saw
saved.
that I had some personal messaging, but as I was presenting,
Okay.
I couldn't get around to them.
Okay. Well, it's saved, so I'm hoping actually that it would be there. I'm not able to see the direct messages to you from here, but if anyone has a direct message that isn't addressed, then feel free to use the continuous chat and send them to Hedy or email Hedy or text her directly on Facebook. Okay, so have a great evening or a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.